Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Ludovica Isidori, whose work includes Test Pattern, Willing to Go There, and Sanctuary, which was just at TIFF, just to name a few of her projects. Welcome to the show.
Hi, very nice to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
I guess my first question, when I was doing some research for this, you said in one of your bios that I found that you studied under Francesco Zanot at Forma, and you also studied under Gianguido Rosi, who was a fashion photographer. And I'm wondering what you got from those experiences that you use in your filmmaking.
So obviously, I come from Italy, and the fashion industry, it's very big there. And so Gianguido Rossi it's mostly a fashion photographer. And I guess the biggest lesson I learned from him was how to create universe. You know, in like photography, especially in fashion photography, you have to create a work from zero in a studio, with the costume, with the colors, with the background. And I think that helps me a lot nowadays when I approach every single movie to understand that my work is not only related and confined to lensing something or to the camera move, but it also involves conversation with especially our department. Because at the end of the day, what we're creating is a universe, is an experience. And there's elements like color that we can bring in with lighting, but that also needs to be brought on by costumes and wallpapers and any other art element. So I guess that was the biggest thing I've learned from fashion photography. And from Francesco Zanot, so he's a photography curator, and while I was training under him, he was writing an encyclopedia about history of photography, and I was helping him in doing research for that. And so I spent like hours and hours and hours just going through basically all the photography that was like ever made. And so I literally trained my eye and my sensibility to respond to images and to see and try to understand what are those elements that like throughout history and throughout countries still gives you an empathic response by just exposing you to a bidimensional image and representation of the world.
I'm going to interrupt this interview for 1 second. We want to thank PixelView, one of our sponsors. They're a streaming solution for filmmakers. PixelView lets you stream your work to remote clients for easy collaboration, and it works with both on-set teams and post-production teams. With built-in video chat, you can discuss and make changes in real time and stream directly from your editing software. Or you can use the hardware encoder to stream from DaVinci Resolve or the camera on set. See the promo code and the link in the video description below. Did you study I'm assuming like when you're working with a curator, if you're doing an encyclopedia of history of photography, you got into like Talbot and Daguerre and all those guys. But is there someone that you discovered that you hadn't heard of, that you were sort of blown away by their photography, that we should check out if we haven't heard of them?
I don't know about that specifically during that period. I think like I'm still to this day blown away by some Ilya Erwitt photos. And like there's this photo, so I'm a recent mom, and there's a photo that he took of his wife and one of his child, and they're laying in bed. And it's a black and white photo, it's kind of from far away, but like in the pose of this woman looking at this baby, you understand the complexity of being a parent and the love and the like outwardly experience. So that's just like one of my favorite photography. But also while I was studying under him, he was doing a project on found photography and every kind of like snapshot and family photos and of people that like you never heard of, and but that they used these tool to, you know, create memories in a way. And I think that's what, you know, got my interest back then. And this idea of like, if you, you know, if you capture something, this need for like capturing something in order to remember, and in order for it to exist even after you're gone, and even when your memories start fading. So I don't know, I think more than like specific photographer is like the power of photography itself, the power of persistency, like the persistency of an image, and the, you know, the collective knowledge and in the collective experience. So
Interesting.
that would be my takeaway.
Now, when I was doing the research, you said that you look for stories that have intimate tone and social impact. I'm wondering if you could explain that or go into that for your work.
Yeah. So someone told me some time ago that like I'm a good reader, which I took as like a really big compliment in being a DP, because to me means that like I understand the story I'm seeing, I understand what I'm reading, and when I talk about intimate tones, to me is just something that speaks about what it means to be a human being on Earth. You know, I think I have the highest respect for human beings, you know, and I personally have the highest respect for life. I think we might live whatever many lives you think, but right now we only live one and we experience one, and it's such a miracle. Like we are aware of like being on Earth, and we can explore Earth, and we are aware of other people. And so when I talk about intimate, it doesn't necessarily have to translate to sad European dramas, even though I love those. But to me, this refers to every story that is asking question and makes you think and reevaluate what it really means to be alive, and what it really means to be a human, you know, and to have connection and to search for connection. So uh, again, that's usually what I'm looking for. You know, I'm not saying like, I think those are elements also that can be found throughout genre. Like I think thrillers can have elements of it. Even like superhero stories might, you know, at times find um, focus more on the, you know, on the individual, on the connection, on the relationship, because at the end of the day, life is made of relationship. That's all it is. Whether it's our relationship with ourselves, with other people, or with our planet Earth, it's what it is about. So, you know, that's what interests me and makes me curious. And also the possibility we're given through uh, movies and by making movies to, in a way, explore and slightly live other lives, you know, lives that we don't have to, you know, the chance to explore otherwise. But you know, and like and that is what challenges me, like portraying characters that have nothing um on the surface, that they're not me. They might be a different gender, living in a different era, or come from a different country, but what it is that makes us humans, what are those deeper grounded elements that in a way link us, and what is that makes the difference. And in the search for those differences, I think is where my interests rely, because it also what pushed me to, you know, explore and learn.
Yeah, well, and it's the gray areas of life, right? The things that we don't usually show on screen, which are interesting. What so like one of the things, we have a lot of young people who watch these shows. And so how can you take me through your process of making the transition from shooting shorts to shooting, you know, television and features? Because that's a big thing people coming out of school want to do, is make the transition.
So my biggest advice would be find your directors, because at the end of the day, I think like a more business savvy advice would be find your producers, because at the end of the day, they are the people who might eventually hire you. But for me, is find your directors, because you want to make sure, because if you want to make sure that you find partners, that you find people that not only click with you, but that um, you can be in a room with and you can understand and expand. And if you're able to share universe and to create universe with them, they will bring you, they will fight for you. These are the people that, you know, obviously it's a bet because you don't know. You don't know if like they're gonna get the next feature, they're gonna get the next pilot. But what you know is that if they do, they will fight to have you on board. Um, because it's like a love story, you know, like once you find your person, you find your person. You just in movie you just find more of them. Um, the other thing is give yourself opportunity. Obviously, if like find your voice, it's a fine balance because you want to find your voice. You don't want to say yes generically to everything that comes your way, because quality also matters. And so you want to make sure that the project you're on are somehow a good representation of what you believe in or what you're able to do or your voice. But at the same time, you have to understand that if you shoot one short, you're presented with 10 and you only shoot one, then you might only have one person or like a few people around that one project, they're going to come back to you. While if out of those 10, you take 5, because you find good reason to take 5, then your pool of people and your pool of contact expands. And so chances are higher that like, you know, somebody will call you back. And then the rest is not luck, but it's, you know, it's random. It's like life. Sometimes you meet one person and that project like turns your life upside down. Other times or other careers, you need like 4, 5, 6, 7 years of shooting shorts and before, you know, you find the movie that like launches you. And also for young people, like, you know, we tend to say, oh, I've made it, like that project made my career. It's not a thing. There's a project that might launch your career, and then your career might like be very fruitful and very you know, under the spotlight for a few years, and then you might get quiet a little bit more, which doesn't mean that you're not putting out good work, and it doesn't mean your career is any less. It just means that maybe for a couple of years it's getting less attention, but it comes and goes in waves. So, you know, so just be
Well, it's so
always
interesting.
proud.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say it's so interesting that you say that because I've talked to like a friend of mine and I keep talking about how it's interesting because we've looked at very famous editors or very famous cinematographers, and if you look at their careers, it'll be like one movie that's huge, and it'll be, you know, several years of smaller movies that aren't a part of the cultural, you know, zeitgeist, and then another big one that's huge. And there's these little pockets where they're working on stuff still. It's just not clicking as big as the other ones. It's not that they're not as you know, bad films or anything. It's just that they're, you know, they don't get the distribution or they don't get, you know, the marketing or anything behind them.
But I think that like, does that defines your career as a less successful? I don't think so. Like,
I don't,
I
you know.
think, you know, and I think that's like an idea that needs to be loud and clear. Like, of course, you
Mhm.
want a break. Of course, you want to be known. Somebody asked me, like, what do you want to be known as? And it's like, I just want to be known, but I don't want fame. It's not about fame. It's not about being the hot person of the month and then 3 months later, no one remembers you. The point is you want to create a network of people with which you can do good work that you're proud of, work that like touches, you know, subjects that can change the narrative, that can educate people, works and projects that like challenges you as a human, as a professional, and that allow you to learn and evolve. And you know, you can't be under the spotlight for like 40 years. And I don't even know, like, and maybe most DP don't want that. You know, we're I think like actively choosing a job that requires a lot of really hard work, but not always, you know, fame or
Mhm.
glitter or, you know, but that doesn't mean anything. And that's why I think after like the more you work, the, you know, the more your career evolves, I think the more specific you have to become about what you put your time on, and are you going to be proud of it, you know,
Mhm.
are you going to be proud of your work, whether or not it's going to
Yeah.
be the new Sundance movie. And you know, and then just keep going
Yeah.
and
No,
endurance and resilience
yeah.
are like two really important things. Just be resilient.
Yeah. Now, how, cause can you tell me how you approached Sanctuary, the film that was at TIFF recently? Like, how
Yeah.
did you like figure out the way it was going to look and the style?
So first of all, I read the script, and within like page 3, I was like, wow, what is this script? Um, and then I spoke to the director, Zach Wigan, who is a visionary and is a dream to work with. And I was like, I have to do this movie and I have to work with this guy, because you could feel his excitement and his vision, and it was thinking big. On paper, is 2 characters in a room, um, a big room because it's a suite, so it's technically
Mhm.
3, but still. Um, and what we ended up creating is like, it's a journey. It's like a cinematic journey. And so I think a lot of the credit goes to him, because he had a very, very specific and clear idea about making this something not just upbeat, but exciting, and making these in a way that, like, you know, like cinema in this like glorious day when it was artificial in a way, meaning
Mhm.
cinema was aware of itself. It wasn't trying to tell you I'm a documentary. It's like, no, I am a movie, and I'm playing with all the elements a movie can play with. I'm playing with camera, I'm playing with color, I'm playing with music. I'm like leading you and misleading you so I can create an empathic experience. And I think that's what we did. You know, it was a challenge because obviously, you know, it's 2 people in a room for like 96 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, and so you want to make sure that you create a cinematic experience that you push and pull the audience, but you don't take away from the performance, which were astonishing. Um, and so the goal was like, how do we find that balance? How do we make sure that we highlight every nuance and every subtleties that is going on in the relationship between these 2 people? When like, how do we, you know, how do we portray the role play? How do we subtly but efficiently like make sure that the shift in power, the constant shift in power, is
Mhm.
present and it's haunting you, but again, it doesn't take over, and it's still support, and it's, you know, in support of the acting. And so that was the big question, and I think um, that was where the most of our work went for. Like, and you will see it in the movie. The movie is like has chapter. It's like
Mhm.
macro chapter and micro chapter, and the camera is never the same. The camera modulates. You have very traditional static moments that alternates with like handheld whipping from left to right, all the way to, you know, camera rotating 360 in a
Mhm.
few places. And but nothing is gratuitous. Nothing is just a trick. Nothing is just like camera extravaganza per se. Everything has to do with what the movie is about. Everything is tied strictly to the narrative. And so, yeah. And so I think we ended up with a roller coaster, which
Mhm.
is extremely modern and extremely contemporary, and it being entertaining, but at the same time, it's an homage to, again, the artifact, the artful artifact that cinema once was and can still be.
Now, did you, because whenever I've worked with cinematographers, like I don't like to work on set because the hours a little crazy, but whenever I was on set, there's usually a camera operator and then the cinematographer, but I have met cinematographers who like to operate the camera or directors who like to operate the camera. And I feel like the framing of an image is so important. Like, are you someone who likes to control the camera and operate it yourself, or do you hand that off to a camera operator?
So I usually operate myself because I find it like there's nothing more sacred than the moment when the camera rolls and you're behind the viewfinder and the actors are performing. But in this specific case, I was 8 months pregnant when I shot the movie.
Yeah.
So I had great DP friend of mine who's also a camera operator who came and operated the camera for me, and was also there in case anything happened and I had to fly back to LA to give birth.
Yeah.
And that was it was not challenging, but it was new because, again, I'm used to, and obviously we had a talk at the beginning, and what I told him was like, there's going to be certain scene where I need to be behind the camera because it doesn't matter like how well I can prep you and how much we can talk with you and Zach, but there's going to be a moment where I just need to be, because it's a guttural instinct, so there's an intimate scene where even though there is no nudity, there's a level of intimacy and a level of vulnerability of the actors in front of the camera that I felt I had I had to be behind the camera. I had to hold that space for them. That was my responsibility. But again, it was a conversation, and I think because the camera operator who did second unit, like Vadim Einbinder, which is my friend, because he is a DP as well, he fully understood from the very beginning what I was telling him. And so, we discuss framing and we discuss rules and we discuss, all these things. But then at the end of the day, there were moments where like, he was going with his instinct. And at times I was like, that's fantastic, because I also believe that every collaborator that you have with you on set, if you give them the freedom and if you empower them to make decision and to trust their instinct, they will bring you the unexpected and they will make your movie a better movie. So for that reason, there were times where like he came up with ideas. I was like, I feel like we just, need to move the camera like 3 inches this way or up or down. And I was like, that's brilliant. Let's do it. And there were moments when I was like, no, I think I need to stop with my guts and let's go back to what we discussed, So.
Well, it's funny because one of the things I miss about being on set was getting to watch the actors perform and seeing the changes in between, like just watching the director walk up and just quietly say something and then walk back, and all of a sudden there's a completely different performance, and that was always fun. Was there a particular?
Magical.
Yeah,
it's such a privilege, and like, because you prep and you build and everyone rehearse and like there's all these elements that like Evan like are controlled to an extent or prep or like, but then something happens, then the actors just like shift minimally and like an entire world opens up. And like, we work with like Margaret, Qualley and Christopher Abbott, and they are phenomenal. Their range is absolutely from a different world. And and sometimes you just need to be sure that the camera can listen to their cues. I know the camera is observing, but I think the camera can listen, can feel the pulsing energy that they emit, and then they do the rest. And when you witness that, it's sacred.
Yeah. Now, what would you say was the toughest scene for you to tackle in this film, and why?
So from a technical point of view, again, we had we have a day where we had, technocrane, camera rotating, and there was a lot of work and prep just to make sure that everyone knew what was going on. And you'll be surprised, but there's like an incredible amount of people that need to know exactly to like the millimeter where the camera is going to go, or like it's involving our department, it's involving, technician, key grips, and camera operators, and a lot of that. But that's just technical. The hardest scene, I don't know. I feel like everything is a challenge on its own. You take risk at time. Towards the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where in a bathroom, there's no spoiler. I'm just and for that we approach it with like camera angles. They are not usually flattering for actors, whether go very high or very low. And I went as far as like underlighting Margaret Qualley with a green light, which is on paper the least flattering thing you want to do to someone like her. And so you take risks. And then also within that scene, there's a dolly, but you do it. I think like every scene was hard to the extent of there was a very specific design. There was a very specific mood that the scene was calling for. And that's thanks again to Zach, because he trusted himself, he trusted me, and trusted the vision for the movie. There was no safety. We jumped without safety. We decided that this was the movie we're going to make, and that was the number of shots we needed, and those were the type of shots we needed, and that's what we shot. There was no like extra coverage just because, or we'll fix it in post, or like it was no, we're making this movie. And also to that extent, like going back to the idea of making cinema, taking risk, being deliberate. That's tough because at every given moment you might be missing something. You are like, you don't know what if. You're not playing safe, but there's no other way, because that's the voice of the movie, and you have to just trust it. So
Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I know I'm gonna have a lot of backlash in this, but it's Dirty Dancing, because, and I watched it in Italian for many, many, many years because we watched movies dubbed. It's just something that like my mom and I don't know why, but Italian TV tends to screen it during Christmas time.
Interesting.
And it's just something that like I used to watch with my mom. And it's like, is it a good movie? Is it problematic right now for a lot of reasons? Absolutely. But also, I don't know, there's this naivete about it, and there's dance, plus it's a love story, so it's like, yeah, why not?
Now, do you bring it out every Christmas now? Is that your Christmas go-to?
Kind of, yes. And I think last year they screened it last year or the year before, I don't know now with pandemic, but at the Hollywood Cemetery for the 4th of July. And so I dragged my girlfriend to watch it, and she was like not very happy about it. But hey, it's tradition at this point.
It's a classic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Thank you for your time, and this was lovely, and
Yeah. Well, and that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.